Hello there everyone and welcome. My name is Waffles the Asian Yenber and today I'm here to talk about this comment right here. How to know who's viable or not when it comes to team building. Now you can see I got this comment about a month ago on this video, Get Help in Dokkan Battle, which is basically where I was like, okay, send in your questions. We're going to sit down on stream and we're going to answer all these in a guide. You probably saw a few of those actually come out already on World Tournament and Chain Battle. But I wanted to redo this one particularly because I wanted to do it a little bit better. On live stream, it's a little bit difficult to format it as well. So I want to sit down, just go over every single thing that you should consider when you're trying to figure out whether a unit is viable or not. Because there's honestly a lot of factors in trying to figure out, is my unit good? Is my unit trash? You can, of course, just go to content creators. They're going to tell you. But I think it's also important to learn why it is that one unit is good and one unit is bad. So let's get into it. Before we do, if you enjoy my content or you want to learn more about Dokkan or you want to see more guides, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. So one, I know people like this kind of stuff and I can sit down and talk about that a little bit more. And if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get my videos and I like making cool Dokkan content videos. Anyway, also, if you have any questions, you can also leave them in a comment and I'll be happy to answer those at some point. But let's get into it right now. Okay, so as you can see, there are a lot of different factors to consider when trying to figure out whether a unit is good or viable or not. Now, we're going to go over each and every one of these in today's video, so you can check the timestamps down below if you want to skip around, but let's start by talking about the leader skill over here. Now, there's two parts to the leader skill. One is the actual percentage, and it's the attack percentage that you want to worry about, not necessarily the defense and HP, because those, they do play a factor, but they're not nearly as important as the actual attack percentage there. And the second thing is whether or not the category is actually good. So we're going to talk a little bit about two different ones, but first, 170% attack, if we're just looking at the percentage, 170 is great. 170 is like the benchmark for, okay, anything higher than this is one of the best attack percentages you're going to be able to get. 150 is still decent. 150 is not a problem, nothing to sneeze at. 120 is where you start getting like the 120, 130 range is where you start getting into, my unit doesn't have the best leader skill, but it's viable, it's passable. Anything lower than that is not going to show up very well. So I would say if it's lower than 120%, even if it's a good category, it is not a good leader skill. So just keep that in mind. 120 is the benchmark for you are using what you can. 150 is kind of standard. 170 is very good. Now, when we talk about two different units and their categories, let's talk about these two that just recently came out. So AGL Kid Gohan, Heavenly Events is a god-awful category, right? We take a look at this. It's so limited. You don't have that many combos of units to actually use. Eventually, it's going to be better once they add more units to this, but for right now, this is terrible. Now, you have 170% HP attack and defense, which is great. We like the percentage, but because the category itself is bad, it makes this part of his leader skill a bad leader skill. So you do need to keep in mind that both of these play a factor into whether or not the leader skill is good. Now, Bonds of Master and Disciple is a little bit better, so that's going to be fine, but you've got other units you can use that are going to be better if you're specifically just running Bonds of Master and Disciple. If we take a look at Future Gohan, for example, Future Gohan's got 170% of Bonds of Master and Disciple, and his second category right here, Hybrid Saiyans, is a much better category. So when we're just talking about leaders, the Int Future Gohan is going to be better than the AGL Kid Gohan. Now, AGL Kid Gohan is better for other reasons that we're going to get into in a little bit. But when we talk about the leader skill, this is going to be what's better. Now, if we look at this leader skill, for example, Kamehameha, first off, is one of the best categories in the game, and you're always going to be able to find a Kamehameha leader, even if it's not going to be this Trunks and Goten, because everyone and their mother runs LR AGL Gohan somewhere in the friends list. So you never ever struggle to find an LR AGL Gohan friend lead. So you could always run the Goten and Trunks' team, which is going to be really helpful because if I want to run Heavenly Events or run units like Heavenly Events plus Bonds Master and Disciple, I'm not going to be able to find this AGL Kid Gohan lead in like 2 weeks because Heavenly Events is terrible. I'll be able to find this in Future Gohan maybe, but even then, like Bonds Master and Disciple is not a popular category. So it's a little bit harder. But with Kamehameha, I will always be able to run this team, and that was one of the reasons that makes this a better leader skill. And Gifted Warriors, its supplementary category here, is also a little bit of a limited category, not too limited here, But what it does is it gives you access to units that you wouldn't have had in Kamehameha that are very, very strong. For example, Frieza. You've got, for example, Vegetas. You've got Piccolos. You've got Cauliflas. You've got Gotenks. These are all very good units that Kamehameha likes to have access to that it wouldn't normally. So being able to have both of those combined together in a 170% attack leader skill is incredible. This right here is a peak leader skill. Now, when we talk about, for example, type leader skills, which if we look really quickly at, let's say, Gotenks over here, Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, type leader skills right now, the best you're going to get is 130%. You're not really going to be running any type leads except in like Battlefield, where you really just need to have as many teams as possible, and type leads ends up being the best way to do that. But overall, don't worry too much about type leads. 120 is pretty much fine. There's no real problems after 120. Even 100 for a type lead is fine. You're really not using a type lead most of the time. So really don't worry too much about leader skills for type leader skills. Okay, so the next thing you want to consider is how many categories the unit is on, but also how many good categories the unit is on. Because essentially, if you're running a unit that has maybe 1 or 2 good categories, for example, STR Videl, who is very good in her own right, you're only going to be able to use her on those 2 teams, which is a common criticism for Videl. If we look at her other 2 teams over here, Earthlings is a bad category, so no one's going to be running that, and you definitely aren't going to want to run that unless you're doing some sort of challenge. And Defenders of Justice is her own category, so you're not going to be running her there anyways because you're already running her under Peppy Gals. So she, while she's good, only can be run on those 2 categories. But when you look at someone like in Gotenks over here, who has a ridiculous amount of categories and a pretty good amount of good categories, fusions, hybrid Saiyans, Majin Buu Saga, transformation boost, Super Saiyans, final trump card, there's a lot here that you can work with, which means that you can bring in Gotenks to a ton of Super Battle Roads, and he's going to be good in Super Battle Roads for another reason we'll talk about later. Whereas Videl, she would be fantastic in Super Battle Road if you could bring her to more of them, which is the big problem there. Same thing with like LR AGL Gohan. He is going to be fantastic because he's got a ton of different categories, and he's just good on each of those categories. So you're going to be able to use these a lot more than someone like STR Videl, which is kind of why when you look at these categories, you want a unit that has a lot of categories and a lot of them with common friend leads. We talked about this a little bit with the leader skill part with Kid Gohan and Kid Gohan and the other one, I forgot right now. Oh, Fizz, Goten, and Trunks, where the leader skill for Fizz, Goten, and Trunks is going to be better, so you're going to see it a lot more often. But AGL Kid Gohan, you're not going to see very much pretty soon. Same kind of thing. When you're looking at these categories, is it a category that people run? If it's not a category people run, if you try to build, for example, Piccolo, I love Piccolo, Physical Piccolo. He's a really defensive unit. He's fantastic, but I'm never going to find a Namekians lead unless I ask on Twitter. So like, if you're trying to figure out, is the Namekians category good? You'd look at the friend leads and you'd say, well, doesn't matter how good it is, because if no one runs it, I can't run it either. So until they fix the friend lead system, you have to judge the categories based on their popularity and how well you're going to be able to use it, as well as whether or not the categories actually have a lot in them. For example, if we took a look at Kamehameha, or you know what, let's actually take a look at Special Pose and Youth. Special Pose is not as bad as it used to be, but it used to be really, really bad. So Special Pose used to have not any of these right here. It just had like the Goten and Trunks, it had Great Saiyaman 1 and 2, the Ginyu Force, it had Gotenks units, and that was basically it. And so you basically couldn't run a team with Special Pose. It doesn't really add much to use because all the Gotenks units were already unused. The only ones you get really are these like Gohans, and I guess Ribrianne and Kakunsa and Rosie if you want to run them, but you're not running them on Youth. Youth over here, Youth is a fine category, but it's an example of a category where the leads aren't actually used very often. Gotenks is kind of okay now. Gotenks is built up in popularity now that he's come back a little bit, but for example, if I wanted to run Kid Goku with Youth and DB Saga, you're not going to be able to do it. You won't be able to find a friend lead. So his category, his leader skill, and his categories for specifically Youth and DB Saga, I would consider those bad categories. I would say Youth is a little bit better now. That's not Youth, this is Youth. A little bit better now just because In Gotenks is more popular, but even having all these good units here, it relies on whether or not people are actually running them. So look at how many categories the unit's in, how many of those are good categories, how many of them are popular categories, and that's going to help you figure out whether or not you're going to be able to use this unit a lot. Because again, you want to use them on as many teams as possible if it's a good unit. For example, like the ones we showed, STR Vidal. I would love to use her a lot more often, but you need to have her on different categories. And right now, she only has these two good ones. These two are ones you're not going to consider. So hopefully that helps. Let's go on to the next point. So the next thing you want to look at when you're evaluating a unit is their link set. Is it a common link set? Is it a good link set? Of course, the actual effect of the links doesn't matter nearly as much as you'd expect, so you don't really need to look in depth at oh, this one has a little bit more attack percentage. As long as there's good attack percentage links, there's plenty of those. As long as there's decent key links. If the unit gives itself key, the key links is not nearly as important, or has support or anything like that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Those I think are important, but the main thing is, do you have a good linking partner? Do you have several good linking partners? Do you have a lot of very common links that you can basically throw on a team? This is going to link just fine with the other unit. It's not going to take away from that unit. Those are all things to really consider. So I'd say 5 or more good and common links are going to be fine. You're not going to have to worry about them. They're going to be great in basically every team you bring them in. 3 to 4 good links are fine. You don't have to worry too much. You just want to make sure you have one good linking partner to link with them. 2 or less is where we start to get into the scenario of this is probably a bad link set. Even if it's got something incredible, let's talk about STR Bojack over here. I don't think it was the Heraclan. It was Galactic Warriors. Attack and defense 20% is fantastic. But Galactic Warriors is an incredibly niche category that only has Bojack and Zangya, and I think one other person from his squad. So this, while the effect is great, is a bad link because it's not going to be shared with anyone except Bojack. So you want to link him basically with a Bojack, or you're not going to get this extra boost. So that's going to be one we'd consider a bad link. Same thing with the Heraclan, a bad link, but a very, very good link now after the link level update. So you do have to get it to link level 10, but attack and defense 25% for big bad bosses. And all of these units have big bad bosses. So ultimately, big bad bosses is going to be a very good link because it has a good effect and it links with a lot of other units. So big bad bosses is one that kind of makes STR Bojack's link set a little bit better. He's got enough decent links that he's going to be kind of in this category right here, the 3 or 4 good links. We do want to link him with Bojack, but he's going to be okay on other teams. One unit, though, that we just talked about a little bit ago was STR Vidal. The other common criticism Vidal gets is her link set is terrible. And if we take a look here, Courage, right there, Courage is, yeah, it's okay. It's not great. There's not a lot of these units that share her categories except maybe Hercule and Boo there. You look at some other ones like Money. I think is Trunks, Bulma, and Hercule and Vidal. Yeah, so she's not going to link that well with a lot of these units either. But if we take a look at something like Cold Judgment, a lot more units are starting to get Cold Judgment, so it's becoming a little bit of a better link. Same thing with Infighter. A lot more units are actually getting these recently, so you've got units that she can actually pair up with. Champion Strength is going to be a garbage link. As we take a look here, it's just Hercule and just Vidal, so that is a terrible link. If we look at Battlefield Diva is a great link because every unit in Peppy Gals basically gets Battlefield Diva. So you're going to be able to link her with any Peppy Gals unit and expect that you're going to get at least that 2 key. Of course, you get the extra dodge chance if you have built it up to level 10. But a unit that is a fantastic link set or has a fantastic link set is Cooler. And essentially all the Freezers and Coolers usually have great link sets because they all link with each other very well. And they're all usually pretty good units. Thirst for Conquest, if we just take a look at that, that's basically everyone in Terrifying Conquerors, right? We take a look here, that's basically Terrifying Conquerors. You take a look at Universe's Most Malevolent, that's gonna be the Cooler in the Frieza teams, right? Cooler Frieza, right there. You run, gosh, Metamorphosis is gonna be for any unit that transforms, I think, or at least a lot of the ones that transform and heal themselves a bit. You got other units like Strongest Clan in Space, that's a Frieza and Cooler link. So I can expect that if I wanna bring Cooler, all I have to do is link him with a Frieza or with another Cooler unit and he's going to be fine. So that right there is a good link set where I don't have to worry too much about team building. But when we come to Bojack over here, Bojack, I only have to worry a little bit because I just need to make sure that, oh, he's got an okay linking partner. Maybe I link him with a Bojack if I want him to do his like best work possible. But someone like Videl is one that their link set is bad and you have to worry about it when you're team building, which is one thing that makes that a little bit of a worse unit. Now, again, Videl is very good for all the other reasons over here that we're probably going to get into next. Yeah, right over here with damage and stuff. But her link set is a problem. Same thing with categories. So these are things that you need to consider when you're actually evaluating your units. Now, a unit can be bad in these two parts, but still be good everywhere else, and that's still going to be a good unit. So don't think of it as like a unit has to fit every single one of these check marks. These are just all different factors that should play into whether or not you think this is good. Okay, so the damage category is actually going to be the easiest one for you to judge. You just go to a showcase and see how much damage it's putting out. If it's doing 5 million or more, you're fine. Basically, you can see stuff that hits like 14 million, 7 million. Those are fine, those are great and all, but as long as you're hitting over 5 million attack, you've got good damage. So I would say if you hit 5 million attack, that's a great marker, you're fine. 3 to 4 million is still good. 2 million is about the benchmark where you want a unit to at least be hitting if it's a modern day unit. Some of the older units, it used to be, I think 1 million was the benchmark where it was like, okay, as long as the unit hits over 1 million, they're fine. But 2 million is kind of where we're at with new units just because power creep and a lot of the units that have come out are very, very strong. If it's less than 2 million, it better have other stuff that it can do because, yeah, less than 2 million is definitely not very good. Now, other things to consider when you're looking at damage, though, is whether or not the unit has effective against all types, because that is going to change the actual amount of damage it puts out, because of course your attack stat and your damage is going to be different. So you'll have more damage if it's an effective against all, and if it has some sort of crit in its passive, if it's got like probably a good amount of crit. I've seen units with I think 18% and that's not very much, but if you have something like 30% chance to crit, or I've seen ones with 50% or 70% or guaranteed crit, that's going to be great. Those are all good, and that's going to really put your attack a lot higher than it's actually shown. So at that point, you look more at like APT calculations, which you don't want to solely rely on that, and that's why we have all these different factors here. But APT calculations can actually be very helpful if it's a unit that has effective against all or crit. So really just look at some Reddit posts, look at some showcases. You'll be able to get a good grasp for how much the unit actually does in most situations. Keep in mind that a lot of the showcases that come out immediately are rainbow showcases, so your unit would do a little bit less, but if it's a rainbow and it's hitting like high 2 millions, you're fine. So don't worry too much about that. So the flip side of damage is going to be defense, and basically you want to look at what their defense stat is on turn 1, or if it's a defense stacker, just what it gets up to by the end of the Legendary Goku event, for example. And if it hits 300k or more on turn 1, you've got a god tier unit and you're absolutely fine. So don't worry about your defense at all. It's going to be tanking basically any hit. But if your unit is a little bit more normal, you're going to be expecting around 150k defense. If it's less than 100k defense, it's going to be kind of a fragile unit. Now, of course, if it's got stuff like damage reduction and things like that, well, then you're in a little bit of a better situation and your defense isn't as important. But you're going to be looking for it to hit at least 150k as a benchmark for it to be not fragile. If it's under that, that's where we start to get into the fragile territory. 150k is pretty much normal. Now, when it comes to damage reduction, if you have 50% or more damage reduction, you're good. That's great. It basically takes almost every hit. For example, I think Golden Frieza has 50% damage reduction, and you're basically never going to take any major damage from a hit that Golden Frieza tanks. Now, 30 to 49% is still good. If it's less than that, it needs to have good defense or you're not really going to see that helping. For example, I think there are some units that have 18% damage reduction, which is okay, it's helpful, but they're not going to be good on its own with just that damage reduction. It's going to need to have high defense, or it needs to do like good damage and some other things. So like if it's hitting 5 million damage and has 18% damage reduction, cool. That's just a little cherry on top. But if we're just talking about damage reduction, you want to hit around at least 30% or more. 50% is like a benchmark for where it's probably not going to take too much damage, assuming that his actual defense stat is pretty decent. Somewhere like World Tournament Gohan has 58% damage reduction. but his defense stat is relatively low because he is a World Tournament unit. So he is going to take most hits pretty well, but in something like Extreme Super Battle Road, he might tank a little bit more than you personally want him to, but he'll still tank it relatively well. So yeah, 50% damage reduction, great. Whoopsies, there was one part of defense that I forgot to talk about, and that was dodge. So basically dodge is how likely is it that you are not going to take damage with this unit this turn. And dodge, when you have a high probability, is fantastic. The problem is that most units are going to fall under that 50% chance, which is where it's just a coin flip. And that's one that some people like to take, but I don't find the coin flips reliable. So I would say if you're looking at dodge as a mechanic and whether or not it's good for the unit and helpful, you want to look at like 70% or more. If it's 50%, it's got to have something else to help you out with damage and defense. Otherwise, it's gonna not really be something you should consider. If it's just gonna be like, oh, sometimes I dodge attacks, like 30% chance to dodge. If we take a look down a little bit lower here, 30% chance to dodge is not very helpful. Like Super Saiyan Gogeta, you're gonna find that that's not reliable. That's the outlier when you're dodging these hits. So Super Saiyan Gogeta thankfully has guaranteed crits and everything once he gets into Super Saiyan Blue form, but as Super Saiyan Gogeta, he's just not dodging enough for this to be a consistent mechanic and make the unit good defensively. So when you're looking at that, I would say 70% or more is where you can consider dodge to be helpful for your defense. If it's just 50%, it needs to have something else. If it's less, this is just like a very small cherry on top that sometimes you get to eat, sometimes you get punched in the face. So it's like, do you really want to consider this a good ice cream sundae if I can't eat that cherry or I get punched in the face sometimes? I don't know. I think ultimately dodge is not reliable and not something you should be considering unless it's over this marker. Guard against all attacks basically means that you will have guard against every single type, which means every type will be not very effective against you, which means you're always going to take reduced damage against any type. And it's the reason why Tech Ultimate Gohan, well, it's one of the reasons why Tech Ultimate Gohan is fantastic. That guard against all attacks means he's always taking reduced damage while he is greatly stacking his defense. And we're going to get into the defense stacking in a minute, but guards against all attacks, very, very helpful for defense. Let's actually talk about that defense stacking right now. In the last section, I want to talk about role and versatility. We've already been kind of talking about what role a unit plays when it comes to its damage and its defense. Is it going to be a tank? Is it going to be offensive? Is it going to be kind of like a glass cannon? But there are some other roles that some units can fill in teams that can be very helpful. Now, of course, there are other super attacks and passive effects that you can talk about, but I'm only really putting down the important ones because all those other ones don't really affect how good a unit is most of the time. For example, like attack stacking. Attack stacking isn't that useful. It's just a nice little bonus you can get sometimes, whereas defense stacking determines whether or not you can use a unit in long form content, which is really what this comes down to is what is my unit supposed to do? And how well does it do it? And what kind of content can I use it in? So is it good in long form content? That's going to be your defense stackers. Is it good in short form content? That's going to be your stunners, your sealers, your lowering attack units. All of this comes down to what role does the unit play? So let's talk about defense stacking. Defense stacking basically makes it so your unit will be able to constantly be building up its defense. So by the time you hit late stages in long form content like the Legendary Goku event, both the GT and the normal one, and Infinite Dragon Ball History, it's going to be able to tank a lot of different attacks, which is what makes some units that don't hit those 150k defense thresholds at the beginning able to hit them at the end. Because at the end, you're going to want to hit like, I think 400k for normal Legendary Goku events, and what was it, 600 or 700k for the GT one? I don't know, something like that. So defense stackers help you hit those markers, which means once you get to that point, for example, Tech Ultimate Gohan is not going to take a lot of damage. So he's going to have greatly stacked his defense, which is really good because greatly stacked defense is 50% stacked. So that's 99 turns. And the reason you're going to know it's a defense stacker is it's not going to have raised defense for one turn. It's just going to have raised defense. So greatly raised defense is 50% every single time he does a super attack up until 99 turns, which if you're not done with your event in 99 turns, I don't really know what you're doing. You might be stalling. I don't know. But ultimately, yeah, that defense stacking is what's going to make a lot of these units way better in long form content. Now, when it comes to stunners or sealers, they are useless in long form content because you're not going to be able to stun a lot of those things in Infinite Dragon Ball history in Legendary Goku event. You can't stun the later stages. You can't seal them. But in Super Battle Road, you can stun the enemies and just make sure you're not taking damage for that turn, because Super Battle Road is what we would call short form content, where those battles are done within the first 5 turns. So being able to get a free turn of damage where you're free 1 or 2 turns of just not being hit, that's amazing. That really helps you a lot. Sealing is less important, but still helpful. Sealing just makes it so that they can't super attack you, but they still can go do normal attacks. So for something like Extreme Super Battle Road, sealing can be helpful, but it isn't going to make or break a unit. It's more of like, it's helpful to have them in your box, but you really want to go for more stunner units instead. Now, one unit we've already talked a little bit about here is Int Gotenks. Oh gosh, I changed the dimensions of things. Gosh darn it. There we go. Okay, Int Gotenks. Now, of course, in his base form, he doesn't stun. In his Super Saiyan form, though, he has a 70% chance to stun for 2 turns. And when you combine that with his many categories you can bring him on, that makes him an MVP in Super Battle Road. Because you can bring him, you can stun in those events, and you can bring him to a bunch of different Super Battle Roads. So that makes him very helpful. But when you talk about long form content, you're building up to Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, and you'll notice that he is a little bit more fragile, but he's going to be doing a lot of damage. So in long form content, you can still bring him, but he's going to fit more of a damager role, whereas in short form content, he's fitting the stunner role. Some units will fit more than one role in different events, or some units can just fit them anytime in different, which just based on how their kit is. So a lot of these are things, if it's versatile right here, if it's able to fit 2, 3, 4 different roles, that's great. The more versatility you have, as long as it's doing those roles relatively well, the better the unit is. So versatility is great, but even if it just fits one of these roles, but it fits it really well, for example, again, Int Gotenks just fitting that stunner role in Super Battle Road, that's great. He does it really well. So units that have that 70% chance to stun are going to do that job very well. Now, other units to talk about here, with sealing, you can use Fizz Gotenks. After the EZA, he's got relatively decent defense, not amazing, but decent, and relatively decent damage, but he's going to be a sealer, so that's going to make him relatively valuable. He's not going to be a god tier unit, but he's going to be decent. Now, lowers attack is another thing that's really just helpful for Super Battle Road. Now, if we take a look at some lower attack units here, a lot of units just have those as part of their super attack. Passive skills are okay. For example, Omega Shenron's really good just because it has minus 40% attack to all your enemies. So that really is like, it's not like 40% damage reduction, but it is pretty close. You're going to be able to tank a lot better in that. However, you're going to notice not a lot of units have that kind of passive skill effect. So you're really just going to be looking at their super attack effect. And of course, you want greatly lowers attack if you can, but lowers attack just in general, it's only a 10% difference. So it's really not that big of a deal. So as long as a unit, for example, Int Frieza is able to tank hits, then lower attack in Super Battle Road, you'll be able to debuff your enemies, and then essentially it's like you're tanking hits like you've buffed up your own defense because you've lowered their attack. So yeah, ultimately lowers attack can also be a very helpful thing. Lowers defense, not really. Lowers defense just makes it so you do a little more damage, but realistically in any of the events that you want debuffing in for Super Battle Road and things like that, you're mainly focused on not taking as much damage. You're able to still do a good amount of damage over time, because again, those do end very quickly. And the other thing that a unit can fall into is support. So I don't think I have a support unit up here. Do I? Oh yeah, I do. I have this Krillin. This Krillin is a very good support specifically for Goten and Trunks team. A support is going to be something like this. Superclass allies, or a category, a lot of times it's a category. Key plus blah blah blah, attack and defense 30%. You want at least 30% support. Anything less than that is fine, but not great. 30% is kind of the benchmark. So if it's under 30%, you really don't consider that as one of the main roles that unit is going to fill. So 30% or more, great. The reason why this is specifically a very good one is this part here. plus an additional ki +2 attack and defense 30% when there is an ally, Trunks or Goten attacking in the same turn. So Trunks and Goten's team has a lot of Trunks and Goten's units, so you've got a 60% support for all superclass allies right here. Another one that just comes to mind off the top of my head is STR Whis, and if we can find him, I'm not 100% sure. I think he's in lowers attack over here. STR Whis is a great support, but specifically for Beerus. All allies attack 50% when the ally includes Beerus, when there's an ally that includes Beerus attacking the same turn. So basically, you bring Beerus and Whis, and then Whis all of a sudden becomes a fantastic support for any unit that's on that rotation. So you make sure that you pair him together with the Beerus in one main rotation, and then whatever floater comes on also happens to get that nice little defensive buff there. Or attack buff, sorry. Defensive buffs, one thing we can just quickly mention with that, defensive buffs are helpful, but not a huge deal. You'll find some units like, I think there's the Hero Extermination Piccolo that has like 70% defense support, which is helpful, but it's not going to make or break a unit. So I would say you're looking mostly for attack and ki support. Defense support is kind of secondary there. Now, those are the main roles that they'll fall into, but all of this comes down to what content can you use this in? For a Dokkan event, you can use basically any unit. Dokkan events are going to be, as long as you have like a team with a leader skill that's, again, up in here like 170, 150, even 120, a Dokkan event is going to be fine. So you don't have to worry about that. But when we talk about whether a unit is good, we're looking at endgame content. That's Super Battle Road, that's Legendary Goku event, that's Infinite Dragon Ball history. Those are the things that make or break a unit, because you can use any unit in Dokkan events. So we look at what can you bring it to and how well is it going to do in those modes. If we look at Videl over here, which we didn't actually get a chance to talk about her too much, she is going to be fantastic. Not just stacking attack, we talked about is not really that important, but she has a high chance of evading. That's 50%. That's helpful. Plus 58% attack when attacking. So she's going to have good damage, 457% attack as a first turn attacker right there. Effective against all types if she evades. So that 50%, if she evades that, now she's got also effective against all types for more damage. Or she's got additional 58% to get us all the way up to that giant marker there if she happens to have taken an attack. And she does 2 super attacks. So Videl over here, her main job is going to be a damager. And she fits that role very, very well. Even though her link set is not great, she's guaranteed that super attack. And so she's going to be able to carry that rotation. And that is going to be a situation where stacking attack is actually very helpful, because she's getting 2 of them every turn, so you're going to actually notice it. And again, because she has the dodge chance, she's not really slacking on the defensive side, so she's still going to be okay in longer form content and Super Battle Road. But Videl right there has problems and is still good. Gotenks we just talked about. Gotenks is going to be great in Super Battle Road, and then still a very strong damager in long form content. We talk about this Krillin. This Krillin is a great support, but at the same time, he's not going to be slacking on the offense. He's still got damage reduction here as well, so he's going to be pretty tanky too, and he's going to be giving everyone crit, or giving himself crit, I think, something like that. And then again, Whis, he's got the dodge chance, so he's going to be good defensively, and he still fits the support, and he still helps Beerus. So there's a lot in that Whis can fill that makes Whis a very good support. Then when we look at AGL Kid Gohan, because I said that we were going to talk about him, he's a defense stacker for long form content, which means you can bring him there. He's a stunner for short form content. Of course, if you got Piccolo or Krillin, or if you've already received an attack, so you put him in the first slot, then he's going to be fantastic, and he's going to get that guaranteed stun at that point. So he fits different roles depending on which content he's in. So it all comes down to what content are you bringing these units to, what aspects are playing into their kit, and how well are they going to do in these different situations. So that's kind of all we think about when we're trying to judge whether or not a unit is going to be good. We look at their link set, we look at their passives and what kind of roles they can fill. We look at their leader skill, we look at how much damage they do, how much defense they've got. It all comes down to whether or not these units are good. One other thing you can kind of also consider as well, dates of when they were released. Usually if you have a unit that was released a long time ago and hasn't gotten an easy A, it's usually going to be a bad unit. There are exceptions and things like that, but most modern day units are still going to be fine in a lot of situations, but when you're trying to judge them against each other, these are all the different factors you use. I know that this was an incredibly long video because I've been looking at each section that I recorded. It was like 5 minutes each section. So thank you very, very much if you've watched this thing all the way through. Again, this was a very important topic, I think, to talk about, and one I wanted to do well, which is why I wanted to sit down and re-record it. So hopefully this helped you guys. If it did, let me know in the comments down below. Of course, you can leave any questions you have. I'll be happy to answer those either in a video or in a comment as well. And I hope you all have a good day, a good week, a good life, and happy summons. Goodbye.